What is up, y'all, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Pierce AC, and in today's video I will be giving you guys the basics you need to start making your own tunes in Forza Horizon 5. The point of this video is to help the community learn by taking knowledge of real life veteran drivers and tuners and applying it to Forza. I did a lot of research for this video. If you guys would like to get more in depth on this topic, all the articles I used are down below. Forza has a very diverse map, and because of this, it calls for many different types of cars and setups. That's why the first step is to figure out the purpose of the car you're building, whether that be cross-country, drag, rally, or road racing, which will be our main focus today. Next, you need to figure out the class you're aiming for. In Forza, there's a performance index, or PI for short. This is Horizon's ranking system for how good a car is. This is a number between 100 and 999 that puts the car in one of 7 classes, as you can see right here. Today, we will be focusing on A or 800 as it really emphasizes tuning due to the low to mid powered cars. Next, you're going to be choosing the car you're working with, which can come down to a lot of different factors. Maybe it's built for a certain purpose where you mainly want to consider power to weight, or maybe you just like a car and want to push the limits of that chassis. For today, I went ahead and chose the E36 M3. It's a very versatile car that can be built into many different things. As I stated earlier, the main focus of this video will be road racing. We will be sticking in A class for today as it's a very solid middle ground between the classes. If you guys would like to see more in-depth guides on other topics like different classes, rally, or maybe a deeper dive into drifting in Forza, let me know down below. With that said, let's hop into our first build. Whenever I am first starting a build, I always come to the conversion tabs first. Here you can swap your engine, swap your drivetrain, or add aspiration. Engine swaps can be very helpful to reaching your goals with a certain build, especially if you're very far from your target class, but just make sure your engine doesn't upset your power to weight too much. For this build, I'm leaving the stock motor as I will not really need that much more power for what I need. Coming to the drivetrain, I always almost recommend all-wheel drive for classes B and up because the added grip you get will almost always be better than what you get with rear-wheel drive, and that grip is very important for being competitive in any of the higher classes. So I am going to make this all-wheel drive. Next, aspiration. It's really going to just help you get more out of your engine. You'll usually have 2 options here, a turbo and a supercharger. A turbo is going to give you more of that peak power, where a supercharger is going to give you a lot more torque down low, and it's going to be more consistent. Sometimes you'll also have the option for a body kit, but it's not really necessary for A class and lower because it's really just going to add unneeded weight. Next, coming to aero. I usually recommend this for classes A and up as it's really going to help your grip in your mid to high speed corners. For this car, I'm actually not going to do it because we're going to be fairly lightweight and low power, and I don't think the grip is going to suffer too much. Next, coming into tires and rims, first section being tire compound, is going to be a very important section. Streets, I usually say for the lower classes as it will most likely just hurt you in A class. The sport can be a good option, but if you're going with it, I really just recommend upgrading to the rally tires as it's really just going to give you more grip at not much of a cost. The semi-slicks can sometimes work in A, but only if you're really lacking the grip. Then the Horizon is the same as the semi-slicks with the graphic on the side. And then the slicks I usually reserve for the higher classes as it's really just going to cost too much for you in A class, and the power is just going to really help later. And the rest of them are really just going to do what their names say, other than the rallies as I said earlier. Next, coming to tire width, I usually just recommend maxing it out because the added grip can help. However, if I need a couple of extra PI later, then this is usually the first thing I'm going to downgrade. Okay, and then the rims are really only going to affect the weight of the car, so keeping that in mind, you can go with whatever you think suits the car the most. For this car, I am going to go with the Wed Sport TC105N. Next, the rim size, in my opinion, really isn't going to change anything except add a little bit of weight, so I'll usually leave it stock. Moving into the drivetrain, first section here, being normally clutch or transmission. The clutch is really just going to affect your shift times, and it's usually one of the last things I will upgrade. Next is going to be the transmission. The only thing to consider here is going to be getting that full gear ratio tuning. If you don't have the option to upgrade to a sport or race trans with keeping the same gear ratios, you will have full ratio tuning later. The only time I recommend stepping up to a higher gear ratio is if you really think you need the extra gear on a straight, but even with that, you should be okay with tuning the stock one. So I'm going to leave this as 6-speed. Then the driveline is really not going to do anything but save you weight, so I'm going to leave the stock as well. Okay, and then the diff, you really only need to get full diff tuning. Beyond that, you'll be able to tune it to whatever setting you want. The different options are really going to affect the preset that the diff is on. Coming into platform and handling, brakes are really going to cost you a lot of PI, and in lower class road racing, you should be okay without that extra efficiency, and you don't really need the tuning, so I usually go with the middle option. Next, always go with race springs unless you're doing drift or rally, but the sport are really never a good option, and that tunability is really going to help you later when you're trying to get your car dialed. I always go with the race roll bars, as that tuning is really going to help later. Now, chassis stiffening, in a lot of cases, it can add a lot of unneeded weight, but in some older cars, the stiffness can actually help you, but you may need to test this a little bit. But typically, if it's a newer car, I will avoid it, but on older cars like this M3, I will go ahead and add it. Weight reduction is another very important category. Most of the time, going with a second highest option is a very safe route, and going full race can make the car somewhat twitchy. However, in this case, the car is a little heavier than I would like stock, and the power is already decent, so I'm actually going to go full reduction here. Next, in engine upgrades, mainly consider power to weight here. However, also take torque into consideration, as it can really help with lower RPM acceleration, especially in your lighter cars. If I do have a little bit more room for engine upgrades, I will typically go for turbo, exhaust, cam, and displacement, as they're going to give me the most gains with not much more added weight. For this build, I don't have much room, so I'm just going to go with the sport intake and a race exhaust, as that's going to put me in my target 800. Before we head out and test the car, I am going to head into custom tuning and walk you guys through my process of setting a base tune. Now, before you start tuning your car, you need to understand the concepts of oversteer and understeer. Oversteer, which is typically seen in rear-wheel drive cars, is when the rear of the car wants to pass the front, which results in a spinning motion. Understeer, which is more common in front-wheel drive cars, is when you're directing the car to turn, but it wants to go straight. Once you grasp the main ideas of these concepts and you can identify when they are happening in your own builds, you'll be able to push your tuning to that next level. Now, with that said, this custom tuning can be very intimidating, but do not worry. I will walk you through each one of these settings and explain what they do and why you want them or don't in your tunes. That is going to bring us to our first section, which is tire pressure. Generally, I leave this around stock until tested with heat, but I would like to introduce you guys to this table right here, as this will help when you guys are tuning later. Now, if you are American like me and you only understand football fields per hour, I remade that same table in pounds. That PSI number is going to be your tire pressure at its ideal temperature, as when the tire's temp goes up, so does its PSI. And I will show you guys how to measure this later on the road. The main idea for tuning your gears is finding the balance between speed and acceleration. All of the tuning here I would leave to do on the road, as it's a lot easier to explain. Camber is the angle of your tires when they are flat on the ground. It's going to be necessary for higher speed corners, and it is all about keeping your wheels flat mid-turn. And as the cars get faster, the negative camber is also going to get more aggressive. Toe in brings the front of your wheels closer than the rears, and toe out does the opposite. You're going to want to avoid excessive toe. However, toe out in the front can help turn in response at the cost of some straight line stability, and slight toe in the front and rear can help with some straight line stability. I usually start with slight toe out in the front and work from there. Caster affects how much your front wheels are turned relative to your car. In a real car, caster helps with driver feedback and will help the wheels return straight after a turn. That is going to translate to Forza by helping increase response and lead to a more active camber. Too much will lead to instability and understeer, and when I first start, I'll add just a bit of high caster. For the next 3 sections, I'll be referring to a formula I learned from Hoki Hoshi, which is another YouTuber, and you guys should definitely check him out. He has a lot of great content, and he's actually the reason I got into tuning back when Forza Horizon 4 came out. Now, I did a lot of research for formulas used in real motorsports, and they all ended up being extremely complex and required information that Forza does not give us. With that in mind, Hoki Hoshi's formula has brought me a lot of success, and I in no way take credit for creating it. This formula is going to be the highest setting minus the lowest setting times your weight distribution plus the lowest setting. To do this, you're going to hop out of tuning, back into upgrades, and find this number right here. That will be your front weight distribution you will use in the formula for the next 3 sections. Now, coming into anti-roll bars, they effectively limit body roll. Anti-roll bars only affect understeer and oversteer mid-corner. Stiffer rear with a softer front can lead to oversteer, while a stiffer front and softer rear can lead to understeer. Now, to calculate the ideal setting here, I'm going to take that highest setting, which is 65, minus the lowest, which is 1, times that weight distribution in the front, which is 52%, and then add that lowest setting back to the number, which is 1. Then I'm going to do the same thing in the rear with the opposite of the front distribution, or 48% in my case. The spring's job are to keep the tire in contact with the road, and the base setting can be found with that same formula. Now for ride height, I will usually leave it around the lowest, maybe 1 up if I'm bottoming out, and that will usually be due to downforce. Both damping effects will affect understeer and oversteer. Adjustments to the settings in real life motorsport usually revolve around how much the car effectively rolls in a corner, so it's hard to gauge in Forza. However, there are some adjustments that can be done from your base setting to combat oversteer and understeer. Rebound controls the speed that the car rolls in a corner, however it does not limit it. The rebound's base setting is going to be found with the same formula. The bump setting controls the unsprung weight of the car. Your base setting will actually be found from your rebound, and Forza recommends 50% to 75%. So I usually start right around 65. So I will take that 10.9 and multiply it by 0.65 for the front, and then take that same 0.65, multiply it by 10.1 in the rear. Like I said, when we were upgrading, I didn't go for the race upgrades for downforce here, but if you did, which I do normally recommend, you can start by maxing it out. However, pay attention to the top speed, and if it drops maybe more than 5 miles per hour, try backing it off a little. Just like the downforce, I didn't go with the race upgrades here. However, slight front bias can help because it will put more weight on the front of the car, which is used to turn in. The goal when tuning your differentials is going to be finding a balance between power and oversteer or understeer. I'm going to leave the most of this tuning for the driving section. The rear bias is going to control how much power is sent to the rear wheels. If you don't have all-wheel drive, then you won't have this section, and typically 60% to the rear wheels is a safe place to start. The first thing you want to do when you get on the road is just drive your car a little bit and get a feel for it. Straight away, you will most likely notice a couple things. For example, I think my gearing might be a little too short and the car is feeling fairly wavy, so I'm going to take that into consideration when I'm making my changes. Tuning can be a long process, but to make it easier, we're first going to look at a couple settings you'll want to start with on every car and build from there. With that said, once you get a feel for the car, you're going to go ahead and open up the telemetry page. On PC, you're going to press T and scroll with page up and down. However, if you're on console, you may have to head into settings and rebind it. Once you have it open, the first page we're going to be on is going to be heat. This will give you a temperature and a graphic to show how hot your tires are. And we're going to be using this page as well as the table I showed you guys earlier to find the ideal PSI setting for our tires. When you start driving, you will notice the graphic change color from yellow to orange, then to red. The ideal temp you want to be at is a yellowish orange, so once you get to that temp, you're going to go back in the menu and take note of your tire pressure. Depending on how far you are from your weight range in this table right here, you will adjust accordingly. For me, I'm around 30 to 31, so I'm going to go ahead and add 4 PSI to all my tires. Once you are happy with your PSI, we will be staying on the tires and miscellaneous page and looking at that camber. The goal when tuning camber is to get your angle as close to 0 as possible mid-corner. To do this, you will take a couple longer corners while looking at that angle of that outside wheel. Then change the camber a bit to get closer to 0 and repeat until you are bouncing between negative and positive, as you can see right here. This will be the same process for the rear as well, so once you get to the front dial, you will repeat the same thing in the rear. The next thing I'm going to be looking at is actually going to be the diff. To start, I'm going to change the lock to 0 and rear to 20. Then I will take a sharp corner and get on the power as early as possible and see if the car oversteers. If it does not, I will add 5% lock to the rear acceleration and repeat until I find the point where the car starts to oversteer. And then I will drop 2 to 3%. We're going to do the same process for the front, starting at 0%. However, we'll be looking for understeer instead. I will generally leave the deceleration lock around 5 to 10%. Once you come to this point, a lot of times your car will feel a lot better. However, there will probably still be a couple things wrong, and they can be frustrating to figure out. Because of this, I have written a possible list of issues as well as solutions that may help you. Feel free to pause the video and read through it. The list will also be in the description if you guys would like to save it. For me, I'm noticing my car is a bit wavy at the beginning and mid-turn, which is leading to oversteer, so I'm going to drop my ride height to the minimum it will go. Then I will head into my roll bar settings. When tuning roll bars, you have to remember that they are only going to affect what happens mid-turn, so if you're dealing with a soft or stiff feeling at the beginning or end of your turn, your issue may be somewhere else. Like I said, my issue is at the beginning as well as the middle, so I'm going to add some rear spring stiffness, soften the rear roll bar, and slightly increase my rear rebound stiffness. Now that you are happy with your alignment and suspension, we're going to go ahead and start with gearing. The goal here is going to be finding the balance in each gear between speed and acceleration. My process for tuning gearing is going to start with bringing your car to a flat long straightaway. From there, you're going to go ahead and launch your car a couple times, and when you do, pay attention to your RPM gauge. You want to see how high it comes when your tires are gaining traction. You want to be able to get your RPM to come just before redline before having to shift. Here, it's going to be a little too low, so I'm going to move it slightly towards acceleration. As you can see, when I do that, it's going to peak right before redline when I'm gaining traction. Once you have the first gear, you're going to do the same thing but go through all the gears. Listen to each gear and see if it's either too long or too short. If a gear is too long, you will hear the car's engine get quieter and the car is going to slow down. And if a gear is too short, as soon as you shift, you will already almost be at redline. Repeat this process until you are happy with your balance of acceleration and top speed. For the E36, I'm going to move each individual gear towards acceleration because I feel like I can get more top speed without losing any power. It's a good idea to get each gear dialed before you mess with the final drive. It's a lot easier to make quick changes later if you're happy with the individual gears. A big mistake I see a lot of people make when tuning is not having a base circuit they are comfortable with. This can help you save a lot of time when tuning, and it is a really strong way to see if your car is going to be competitive in a certain class. For example, whenever I finish a tune, I come over to the Arch-Moulaget circuit and do a couple laps in rivals. This is going to do two things for you. First, it's going to help you tune your car by putting it in a race situation, and it will really show your car's issues before you take it into a race. And second, you'll be able to compare it to lap times of cars you are already comfortable with, and you can decide whether you want to stick with a certain car or not. The tuning process often isn't as linear as I made it out to be, and as you get more comfortable with tuning, you'll probably develop your own tests and processes to tune your cars, which may even be better than mine. That is what this video is all about. I just want to help give you guys the base knowledge to start you guys off, and your tuning will evolve from there. Winning a race is satisfying in itself, but I promise it's a lot more when you build and tune the car you use to win. That being said, if you guys have any other questions, feel free to let me know down in the comments, and if you enjoyed today's video, feel free to like and subscribe. It helps me out a lot, and good luck with your tunes. Most importantly, be smooth, y'all. Peace.